And here we go. And as usual, we have connection problems every single time. Every single time. What's up, YouTube? It's Richie from Boston. We are coming at you live. I have 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗍 joining me again this week. And Gary Wayne just popped in just in the nick of time. Gary, can you hear me, brother?
Yes, I just switched hookups into another device and just got you now. Don't know what was going on, but I couldn't hear anything before, so my apologies.
No worries whatsoever. Gary, you made it just in the nick of time. I literally just went live 1 second ago. I was waiting for you. And
good.
Hey, get yourself squared away.
I'm good.
All right, we're joined also by another author, 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗍. I'm not sure if you guys have met.
No, we haven't.
𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗍 is a CERN aficionado, and he's also pretty well spoken on Genesis 6.
Excellent. I have heard of him, but I've never met him.
Well, welcome, Gary. It's a pleasure, and I appreciate your time in speaking with us tonight and with the audience.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure to be here tonight.
Awesome. I wish it wasn't so much trouble for you to get signed in. I don't know what to do to make it easier for the next time, but I'll try a different route next time.
Yeah, I don't know why. I was going to an empty chat room, so.
I'm wondering if it has something to do with that you're in Canada or something to that effect. I'm not sure.
It shouldn't. I mean, usually I have almost no issues on Google Hangouts, so I don't know why.
All right. All right, well, I'm going to check the chat real quick while you get yourself situated. Anthony, is there anything you want to go over before we get started?
Well, I just wanted to let you know, Gary, I've listened to your most recent interviews, both with Richie and with 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗍𝗍. Just to get some background on your research, I'm aware of your research. I've not read your book, but I took definitive notes, I think, on the two conversations. And what I'd like to do tonight is to allow you to go beyond the basics that you covered in both those interviews and leave those as foundations that people can go back to if they need to come up to speed, but to ask you to go to the graduate level, as I like to call it. What I've noted in your interviews is that you have gone beyond certainly beyond the sensational headlines that many people have presented in those topics of research that you cover, and you go to the definitive, you go to the detail, and obviously by the length and the depth and breadth of your book alone, that would be the case. And so I'd really encourage you to take us beyond that, that basic undergraduate level, and let's go to the graduate level and get into the nitty-gritty that other people, including other authors and researchers, are not covering and that is specific to your area.
Okay.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
Sounds
Cool.
good. After we spoke last time, Gary, I literally got a deluge of emails asking about the blood. What's going on with the bloodlines? Can you expand on the bloodlines that you just covered over last time?
Yeah. Do you want me to do that right now? Are we on?
We're on, brother.
Okay.
We went live 1 minute before you jumped in. I was just going to tell everybody that we were having technical difficulties, and you popped in like a miracle.
Excellent. I apologize for the confusion on getting the hookup, but yeah, bloodlines are, sort of this constitutive thing in my book, and I think it's what's going to play out in the end time. And bloodlines, I think a lot of people out there have this curiosity about the bloodlines, and everybody sort of dips into the Rh negative bloodline. But I think what I'd like to do first is just maybe talk about this as an aspect that what we do know is about the giants and the Nephilim kingships and the dynasties that they created is somehow they survived the flood or they repopulated after the flood. And it doesn't really matter what your theory is on how that happened, and there's about 3 of them, I think, which encompasses them all, is it's more about that the Bible says that that did happen. And if that did happen and they did usurp the kingships afterwards, which I believe that they did, and they created these dynasties and continue to intermarry with the dynasties, that is the thing that I think that we need to focus in on and say, okay, how does that play out through the generations and then into our generation, and then ultimately, how does that affect the end time? And I think when we look at the bloodlines, it's very, very interesting that not only do they intermarry with the bloodlines, but they want to keep track of these genealogies. And the genealogies is a significant aspect of not only Gnosticism and the secret societies in which they belong to, but also to the royal kingship and the royal families of the bloodline. So they want to keep this purity of the bloodline in place. And so when we talk about the bloodlines, most people focus in on the bloodlines of the royals, which many speculate to be the Rh negative bloodline, and it may be. And we do know that the Rh negative bloodline is inserted into human bloodline DNA at some point in time, and it doesn't seem to be central or part of the original makeup. So at some point in time it comes in, and I think it likely comes in more from the descendants of the fallen angels, which are the 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗍 progeny. And as opposed to it being inserted, let's say, from Neanderthal man or Cro-Magnon or some of the other theories that are out there. That's just basically where I come from on that. And what's really interesting is that the Rosicrucians have this constitutive doctrine about blood. And this is a concept that I think most of your listeners will likely have heard of before, maybe perhaps they haven't. But it's about the concept of real. That's R-I-L. And most people may be aware of that from the Nazi connection. What they don't understand is that this is a belief and a doctrine that comes from the Rosicrucians that goes back into prehistory. And this is a potency in the blood in terms of what the Rosicrucians believe that will sponsor a future race of super beings. And it's a belief and a doctrine that's based in race purity and bloodline. Right? So when we talk about this, and then we link that to the Rh negative bloodline of...
Hold on a second, Gary. Gary, 1 sec. Can you guys both check to make sure you have the volume muted on the YouTube channel? Because it's echoing, apparently. I don't hear it, but the chat's freaking out. They're saying it's echoing real bad. Just make sure you mute the volume if you're watching this on YouTube.
Okay.
I can't hear it, but I guess the chat's blowing up saying that it's echoing really bad.
Okay, and you're getting that now? Because I was getting some feedback as well, but I'm not getting it now.
Okay, let me ask. Sorry about this.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's better. There you go. There you go. Have at it. Sorry about that, Gary.
And so when we combine the Rh negative and the intermarrying of what they still do in the royal bloodlines, and not just the royal bloodlines, but the noble families around, and even as it crosses the ocean to the United States, as they bring in the American families, it is about the pseudo blue bloods that are marrying in to get to be part of this bloodline and to ennoble those bloodlines even more. So if you have the Rockefellers and marrying into the Warburgs and the Rothschilds and all the great American families that are intermarrying, they're carrying on this tradition. But it's this belief in this doctrine and race purity and bloodlines that goes back into prehistory, back into Atlantis or Thule, if you're following the Nazi line, that's significant, that could produce a super race of beings in the future that they're trying to bring about. And so when we look at what the Nazis were doing, they were trying to do it through geneticism and basically, trying to purify the bloodlines and create this blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan race that they take back to, again, 𝗦𝗰𝗍𝗍, which is their occultic or Ariosophy religion, which is a spin-off of Theosophy and doctrine back to the giants of Atlantis. And again, we need to understand that this connection that the Nazis would pick up, a Rosicrucian belief, is sort of a significant understanding in all of this, because the Nazis, in my opinion, are a sort of role model or archetype of what the end times are going to be, complete with the occultic religion of the Reich Church and the new man theology with Hitler as this false messiah trying to create the Third Reich and 1,000-year reign of the Reich, which is just a sort of a copy of the millennium. And if you dig deep into the formation of whether it's the Thule Society or any of the secret societies that were in amongst the formation of the Nazi regime, it all goes back to the same secret societies between the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons that organized all of these groups. So it's not surprising that you should have this as a core doctrine of the Nazi belief. Now, it went rogue. Now, not only do you have this bloodlines that's in the Rh negative, and not only is this part of the Gnostic religions that go back into prehistory, which partnered with the Nephilim kingships in the beginning as they crossed the flood and all the way throughout history, they also have some other allegories and beliefs that they sort of tie in that many of your listeners might be aware of or have heard of. And one of them would be the gene of Isis. And what they talk about as the gene of Isis is a couple of things. One is that it would be a DNA marker that would come from the mother goddess and the parents, right? So that would be the fallen angels. So they believe in their belief system that they have what they call a gene that's a marker. And this gene that's a marker also they would call the spark of the divine. And this is only for the descendants of the giants, and very much again connected to Rosicrucian policy to limit the population on the earth and who would take over into the new age or the new Atlantis, as they like to call it. And so what's significant about that is that this spark of the divine, which again people may be aware of if they heard of some new age doctrine, is also referred to as 1,000 points of light. So when you hear this 1,000 points of light, it's the spark of the divine, it's this gene of Isis, and it's heavily connected to the bloodlines and the blood purity and the doctrine of that they need to bring together a new world order and a universal government and a universal religion that is this polytheist religion, because they need to collect the spark of this divine, this 1,000 points of light, so that they can have a harmonic conversion that will permit them to evolve into gods in their belief system. And that's why you see all of this working together. So in the bloodlines, you've got many different tentacles leading out. You have the obvious of the royal families, then you have some of the front sort of wedge of the bloodlines outside, like the Rothschilds, because you can see them, they're visible. They're not the true bloodlines. They actually sort of married in and became the banking arm, and they were originally called the Bauer family. But they have in behind these groups, and starting sort of at that Rosicrucian level and higher, you have the more noble bloodlines. And many of the groups underneath for the secret societies are they take their marching orders from the Rosicrucians, because that's sort of the crossroads and the ladder up. So I think that's a pretty quick foray. I'm sure there's 1,000 questions that you may have on what I just covered in terms of the different aspects of the bloodline and where they descend back to, and different allegories that the polytheists like to talk about.
Wow. Wow, that was quite the intro there. That covered so much ground at one time. Anthony, what do you make of all this?
Well, I think it's indicative of the depth of the research that you've done. And what I'd like to ask, and none of what I'm asking is done in a sense of challenging anything that you're doing. I'm following lockstep, in your footsteps with you. I find it fascinating, the depth that you have gone to make the connections. What I'd like to do is try to keep things focused on what's relevant to us today. It's evident that you understand the bloodlines and the players and the origins, the methodologies. Let's go to their agenda for today. What does this mean in terms of relevance to the average person listening to the program, which we don't have an average audience typically. Our demographics are extremely intelligent audience members. But to the Joe Sixpack walking down the street, why should he care about the bloodlines, and what does it mean to him in terms of his everyday life? And I know that you are a biblical scholar as well, focusing on prophecy. What does this mean to the average person in their daily walk of life, whether they're walking with Christ or not?
Yeah, but that's really such an important question, and try and answer it as best as I can, because it will go off in a number of different areas, or at least it can. But so if we understand that in the beginning and as across the flood, you have this mystical religion and this development of the 7 sacred sciences and the fallen angels, and certainly in the antediluvian time, you have the descendants of Cain, and you have the Nephilim as all partnering and then reestablishing themselves after the flood, affecting our history all throughout in a way that is trying to bring about the end time all of the time. They're just unable to, because there's something called the restrainer that's in place. And then we say, okay, if that partnership came about throughout history and it's still working together, what's it doing today and how does it affect people? So this Leviathan reaches into all aspects of our lives, because what they want to do is bring about world government, and they want to bring about a universal religion, and they want to bring about the end time because they want this rendezvous with destiny. They want to bring this on because the demons and the fallen angels have deceived the people in the secret societies and in the various polytheist religions that everything is in balance in the universe. There's this duality to Gnostic religions or Zoroastrianism, or whichever one you want to pick, that everything is in balance, the yin and the yang. So they believe that Lucifer, as they call him, is the equal of Adonai, which they call the God of the Bible, or our God. And they believe that, and they don't like it that God is a God, but in that he's equal in their belief system, not my belief system, in their belief system, but they believe that they can actually win this, just as if you imagine what's going on in Star Wars, where you have all of this sort of ideology that's sort of encoded. So you have this mystical religion that's working with science, and you have these rebels that are rebelling from the evil oppressive regime, which would be cast off as the God of the Bible and everybody who supports them, that they believe as being the rebels, and Lucifer being the emancipator and the leader of these rebels, that they can actually win the battle, or at least have a place where they can live separate from God. Now, the angels and the demons know they can't win, but it's this deception that they're utilizing human beings. So they're trying to bring this all about. And at the end of the sort of tail, at the end of the dragon's tail on this whole thing is that the false Messiah that they're going to present is, they believe, will have these bloodlines of these giants. And the thing to keep in mind is the glue to all of this is not only the fallen angels and the demons are the bodiless spirits of the original Nephilim. It's the whole concept is what they tried to do in the flood that caused the first apocalypse of water, is they're going to try and do again, which we're going to have the apocalypse of fire this time. But they believe
Right.
It's a different turnout, right? So that's why it's relevant.
Do you think that they, following the hubris of Lucifer, as I often say, I refer to the hubris that Lucifer is full of himself, and certainly he's using that deception for the people, the minions here alive today to do his bidding. But do you believe that he actually believes in his own mind that he can kill God, that he can ascend to the throne of heaven?
No, and I honestly believe that he doesn't believe he can win. And I don't think he ever thought he could win. I mean, he walked amongst the fiery stones. He knows the power of God, and he knows he's part of the creation of God. And yet he rebelled, and he takes a third of his angels with him, which is really interesting, because if they know this is an all-powerful being, and even though they may be powerful, they are, even as a group, not up to the challenge to the omnipotent God who created all things, then why rebel? If you get into fairy mythology and into certainly the fairy aspect of the Gnostic religion, which goes back into the Cathars and the 𝗦𝗵𝗁𝗁𝗍𝗔𝗍 and back to the 𝗦𝗵𝗵𝗿𝗍𝗲 and further back in terms of that sect of the religion, is that they believe that, and certainly from the fairy mythology, which really underlines it, is that this rebellious proud angel, they rebelled with the proud angel because they were looking to win an accommodation from God, an accommodation that would give them their own realm, their own universe, whatever you would like to call that.
Wow.
That's what they were trying to win, because they know they couldn't defeat them, but they were hoping that they would at least get that. But what they didn't anticipate was the resurrection, and that is when the whole thing came to an end. And that's why Jesus goes to the abyss, where you have the impassioned fallen angels and you have the worst of the demons located after the flood for the crimes that they did. And he goes to them and basically says, your plan is over. And when I resurrect on Sunday, and he goes there while he's still in the grave, then it's done. It's complete. So all they can do is try and lead humans who don't know any different astray and cause as much mayhem as possible. But this is why they step in as angels. And again, you can pick the timing that you want, as suppose when the rebellion happened and when they stepped in. But certainly we know from Eden that was the first revenge. And I actually have a chapter in chapter 13 called Lucifer's Revenge. That's the first revenge, is where they're going to step in and try and prevent humankind from being raised higher than humans in the future world, so that that doesn't happen.
So they are driven by a desire to prevent humans from ascending to a higher level?
Yes, because they know and even in the New Testament we learn that humans are going to judge angels, and so they are trying to prevent this from happening. They either want to destroy human beings, or they want to lead them totally in rebellion and away against God, and only in servitude to the giants of that time and the descendants of giants that come later, or destroy them. I mean, they don't really care, but they do like to have their slaves. At least they did in the past. And so that is what is going on again when we see the introduction of the Nephilim in Genesis 6, and that is the second revenge of Lucifer, as I like to call it. And so that's when they introduced the progeny of the Nephilim to enslave humankind. And these bloodlines have worked in partnerships ever since. So they know they can't win, but they teach the humans to, in a belief system, that they can win, and that they teach them that Lucifer is God's equal, which is wrong, but it's part of the deception. And so they also use humans, because you never hear of angels besmirching or talking ill of God. They use humans to do that. That's why somebody who does that is called a beast, right? But you never hear of angels doing that. So they like to use humans to do the slander. That's why the Antichrist, who will be a descendant of the Nephilim, I mean, he exudes hubris unlike anything we've seen since Nimrod, or the really infamous angels of the antediluvian epoch. And I love that word hubris, and I'll use it a lot in my book, because it actually has connection back into Greek mythology of Titans as to when it's applied to the overreach of the Titans.
Okay. Hey, Richie, we're getting a lot of feedback.
We are?
Yeah, at my end, I'm getting all this echo and feedback and scratchiness.
Well, I'm not getting it on this end. You guys want to just check everything? Because you sound fine. Both of you sound good on this end, but the chat's saying the same thing. Anybody hit a plug by accident?
No, I've just been sitting here listening attentively.
So, and has everything been coming through from what I've been saying?
Yeah, I heard you. I heard you fine, but the chat's saying that it's terrible again.
Yeah.
And can you hear me fine now if I do this?
Yeah, you sound good. Yeah, you sound good now. So just to
yeah, okay, good to go. Go ahead, guys.
Okay. So just to reiterate just a little bit, so Satan knows, Lucifer knows that he cannot win the battle. Do you see this as an attempt on his part to sidestep God's coming judgment?
No, he can't sidestep God's coming judgment. You know, at this point in time, he knows that the end is what the end's going to be, and it's in prophecy. So there's nothing he can do to prevent what's going to happen now. The fate has been sealed, and there is not going to be an accommodation, and Revelation is quite clear on that. So he understands that, and the angels understand that. So again, the whole play from this point forward, and I think from the time of the resurrection, and maybe even before that, but certainly by the time of Jesus' resurrection, is that it's to lead as many people astray as possible. And if they can actually destroy humanity's ability, at least in numbers now, to you know, go into the future world, they're going to limit that as much as they can. That's all they can do.
So the real focus, the nub of the issue is, to put it differently, I guess in my own frame of reference, is he's trying to steal as many souls as he can.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Unbelievable.
Well, that's because we're quantum entangled. Okay, so
yeah, and again, that that also goes.
This sounds like revenge.
Yeah, it is revenge, and it also goes to the heart of the blood doctrine, which is kind of unique. So let me just interject that. Not only steal souls, but steal the power of the souls. And you hear of this in occult movies and things like that. And because they believe that there's, you know, and it says in the Bible that the life of a being is in the blood, they actually started to drink blood back in the time, antediluvian times, to two things. One is to prolong life after the immortality was taken away from them in Genesis 6. And the second thing was to develop more of their cognitive abilities. And so this continued, and Nimrod reintroduces blood drinking at Babel. And this whole thing continues and continues in secret societies today. So why is that important as part of this sort of bloodline, blood doctrine? It's because of the life of the blood, that they believe that they can actually gain longer life, more cognitive ability. And you also see this in the fairy analogy. If somebody ever saw the Highlander and you saw the quickening, that's a transfer of that energy that they continue to absorb and build. And this is a constitutive part of the occult, is making yourself stronger through the lifeblood of innocence. And the more innocent and the more painful the death and the more fear, the more power they derive in their belief system.
Go ahead, Richie.
They're saying we're getting feedback again, which I'm not hearing. Are you guys getting that as well?
Yep.
I'm hearing a little bit.
All right. You guys want to just check your connections? Because it sounds good on my end.
All right. Well, let's proceed on. So what we're saying here is this is about energy. This is about the energy derived from souls, increasing the cognitive ability, their knowledge base. So they're getting knowledge and energy, and they're increasing their longevity. Again, this whole idea of ye shall be as gods. But this is feeding who? This is feeding Lucifer and the third of the angels that fell with him. Those are the people deriving the benefit.
I think so, and I think you know, all the other people that go along with the rituals are mostly just doing from a ritual basis, but they certainly believe in this. And I think perhaps, and this is just my speculation and building on your point, is that it's the angels that are in this rebellion and that are going to be tossed to the earth in the end time in the last 3.5 years. I think they're trying to build as much strength as possible to, you know, put up the biggest fight that they possibly can in the end time.
Okay. Now that makes sense as far as what, you know, what's their end point, what's driving all of this. What do the humans that are serving their master, what do they think, what do they believe that they are going to get out of furthering this agenda?
Well, two things. One is that they are going to have this new age that's the first of all is a 1,000-year reign, or the new Atlantis, or the new age as they like to call it, or the age of Aquarius. And in this age, the people, the chosen ones, the ones who are either descendants of Seth in one of the doctrines, beliefs as it comes down, or 1,000 points of light, or the DNA, or the RH negative bloodline, these are the people that are going to be deemed worthy to evolve into God. And so they're going to gain an immortality in this realm, as opposed to the immortality that we're going to get in the next world through the spiritual aspect of it. But they're trying to create immortality on Earth and in this world, and to have their own separate world not governed by God. And that's why you see this drive through all different aspects, not only from how Nephilim were originally derived from Genesis 6, which may happen, it's a possibility if the days are going to be like Noah in the end time. Plus you have transhumanism, plus you have cloning of parts and eventually all of bodies. And I think through the development of these sciences, which is a significant part of their belief system, that they're going to try and, as part of the promise to rebel against God in the end time, where they swear their allegiance to fight against God, that they'll be offered some sort of mortality in the physical world, which has to come through either through eliminating the switch that allows us to grow old in the genes, if that's there, which I'm not convinced that is.
Okay.
Or
Gary, let me interrupt. Gary,
yeah.
Gary, I don't mean to be rude. We're just having real bad audio problems in the chat.
Yeah, they're saying they can hear me and Tony, no problem, but they're having Gary's, every time he starts talking, it echoes really bad, and the people really want to hear what you're saying. I don't know what's going on.
Do you want me to call back in? Reconnect?
If you want to, yeah. If you want to, me and Anthony will hold it down while you do so, because these people want to really hear what you're saying. This is phenomenal stuff.
And one other point, real quick, if you can make your responses a little bit shorter, that way we can interrupt this echo that's going on by having shorter discussions. Maybe that kind of calms things down a little bit.
Okay, I'll call back in 2 minutes or less.
Thanks,
okay.
brother.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Well, what do you make of that, Anthony? That's some seriously eye-opening stuff, huh?
Yeah, and again, I'm glad he's going to the graduate level, as we like to say. So the chat room is asking that I sort of summarize what he has said. The point here that I'm getting, and help me, Richie, with this, is that Lucifer knows the end. He knows the outcome, but he's trying to get revenge. And he is trying to, through deception of humans, get them to serve that agenda of revenge against God. Even though what is promised, what he was saying here at the end, what humans get out of it is the new age, which is being promoted, the one world government, new leader, the creating of a new form of the Garden of Eden that's being painted in the new age genre for humans that are following Lucifer, and that they're being promised immortality, not immortality after death. And so through the delusion and the deception of saying that they can achieve immortality by using technology and science. They can avoid death. Now, obviously, if they're not following the Bible, if they're not reading the Bible, they don't understand the reality of the outcome, that they will die and they will go to hell. But if they are agnostic, if they're atheistic, if they are focused on secularism, then they are not acknowledging what it says in the Bible that the final outcome will be, and that is that they will die and they will suffer for what they've done in turning away from God. So Satan knows the game. He knows the outcome of the game, but he is deluding those people, specifically in the sciences, into believing that their technology can win the day. And that's how I sum it up.
Well, let me break it down even easier from what you just said, from what Gary just said. The angels all rebelled against God because they were told they had to serve us. And now they're trying to trick as many of us to go down to hell with them and serve them. So they're totally flipping it.
Right, because
I can
angels,
hear an echo already.
okay.
I can hear it this time.
Well, the angels were, yeah, go ahead, Gary. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, I just checked back in. I'm hoping there's not a feedback loop here again.
Yeah, I think it sounds good.
Do a sound check real quick.
If you can make just short answers, and
Sure.
We'll just let you take a breath and then, go on from there. Hopefully that'll keep the echo to a minimum.
Yeah, and I was hearing about, as I checked back in, that you guys were talking about how the sciences work hand in hand, and that's because the sciences are backed by this polytheist religion that comes out of the antediluvian epoch, and as the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons established the Royal Society, all sciences still pay homage to the Royal Society today. And these were the last of the sorcerers and the first of the scientists, as they like to say. And so it was created to develop the sciences and to honor the fallen angels and to create things to worship the fallen angels with, just as they did in the antediluvian epoch. And
Sure.
the other thing is to lead people astray and away from God. So it works
Right.
hand in hand. And that's why when Bacon, who is the inspirational founder of the Royal Society, writes in the New Atlantis that you have this religion in this new age of Atlantis that they're trying to bring about in the end time, it marriages with science. And this is that polytheist religion because it was born together.
Okay. And again, looking at my notes from your other interviews, and speaking of Lord Bacon, who, as you agree, is really Shakespeare, and the implications of what he wrote are evident, but do you see an equivalent person, or maybe an equivalent group, or maybe just these societies themselves, an equivalency to Bacon? I realize that he's sort of the founding father of the secret societies, just to put it in a box, but do you see an individual or perhaps an organization or a company that is really building on the shoulders of Bacon and carrying forth his works and his books and his writings and his agenda?
No, I don't see any one individual that is that you can see that's physically sort of pulling those puppets. And even if you want to talk about people like George Soros, I mean, that's still, it's too visible. So you're not going to see the true power brokers, but you're going to see their front and center organizations, right? And those are many, and they have, I mean, it's just an incredible web of secret societies. And, it kind of splits down, into, I guess, probably about a half a dozen organizations that really sort of propel this whole Leviathan of organizations. And so, I mean, you have the Freemasons, which are one, and you have the Illuminati, and you have the Rosicrucians, and everybody knows about that. And you have the Jesuits, and everybody knows about that. And you have the Rothschilds from the banking side, and you've got everybody knows about them. And you have the Royal Society. But at at that Rosicrucian and just below level, these are all sort of operated and controlled by the Rosicrucian Society. And so if you're looking for a main group, that I would look towards the Rosicrucians. So because all of these other smaller organizations report to these other organizations. So
Right.
you have, you know, even if you have the Bilderbergers, that reports to the Rosicrucians, and if you have the Skull and Bones, that's basically Illuminati, and on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And just as within Christianity you have the Gnostics, they're also reporting back to the Rosicrucians, and the Gnostics that have been in Catholicism since its basically formation and before, through the Collegia, Roman Collegia, and the building of Mason guilds that were building the temples where they hid themselves in, you know, and they were manifested later in like the Augustines or the Cistercians and the Benedictine monks, who eventually were able to form the Templars within the Roman Church. You can see that this Leviathan reaches back and forth throughout time and throughout everything that's going on, and it reaches into education, it reaches into entertainment today, it reaches into government. And so not one person, but you can see sort of the major organizations that are going to govern different aspects of things.
Okay. So if we have a tie between the Rosicrucians and the Vatican, the Catholic Church in general, but the Vatican, and I'm not trying to make a comparison of the Pope being, you know, a latter-day Bacon. That's not my question. My question is it really that the Rosicrucian Society sets the agenda, sets the pace for the Vatican itself?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
There's been a bit of power struggle all the way through, but, you know, at the Rosicrucian level, half of that is pure blood with the Rosicrucian level. And so these are the ones that are representing the main families that rise above the Rosicrucian level. So the Jesuits are just sort of below the Rosicrucian level because they're the most important of all of these organizations that are sort of the modern wedge and were formed after the fall of the Templars.
So is there a group that is above the Rosicrucian level?
Yes. Yes. So again, many people may have heard of this. You've got the Committee of 300 that are above the Rosicrucians, and some people believe there's another one above them called the Grand Druid Council, but there's not a whole lot of affirmation that I can have that that's not that's different than the Committee of 300. Then you have the Council of 33, and then you have the 13 families.
And then you have the 13 families at the very top?
Yep.
Wow.
Okay. And is there a way to put a name to the 13 families?
Yes, and when we talk about the 13 families, it's the 13 families more from a Western perspective, as opposed to there are other family bloodlines that sort of went into China and around the world with some of these bloodlines. But for the most part, the 13 families are driving this whole aspect from the West. And so you've got some very, very famous bloodlines that are in there, you know. And so if you have follow and let me just back up a step there. So you've got royal families that are involved that have some of the pure bloodlines, and you have to follow the Merovingian bloodline and the Plantagenet bloodline, which descends through that and comes through the House of Stuart, which is a significant house that is one of the more plausible families that is likely to be, you know, leading candidate to present the Dragon Messiah for the end time. And you've also got other very, very long-standing bloodlines that are, for example, the Sinclairs. And so you also have anything to do with the Plantard or Plantagenet families. And I list the families in the book as they seem to come down, but that's also you have to understand these are all nobility bloodlines, and so they intermix into the royal families as well.
Okay.
Oh,
well,
and I would also, just to tap that a little bit more, follow the King of Jerusalem title that is held by the King of Spain, because that's the title that doesn't necessarily go from father to son. It's handed to who they want to hand that to, as what a Pendragon title was, during the time of King Arthur, which is again all the same sort of belief system. And what's important about this is in their bloodlines and in the families, they believe that they also have descendants that go back to the Benjamites and King Saul. And so if you go back to Joshua, Jerusalem was awarded to the Benjamites, and that is a title that the Antichrist is going to claim when he's crowned in the temple at the abomination. So follow that King of Jerusalem title.
Okay, so you were mentioning Jerusalem, and that was the Benjamites?
Yes.
Okay, what is your take on the most recent announcement by UNESCO that no longer is Jerusalem the city of the Jews, so to speak?
Well, I think this thing is going to continue to, move around, and there's all sorts of things that they're going to be trying to do, and anything that they can do to change the times, they're going to try, but they can't. But at the end of the day, what we do know is we won't have peace in the Middle East, and I don't believe that Jerusalem is going to be moved away from the Jewish people until the very, very end, where they may make it a world city, but that's part of the negotiation and the security negotiation for Israel. And I don't believe that this thing moves forward very quickly, but it's interesting that this whole idea is being pushed harder and harder and harder, and from different aspects. But it's kind of like pushing a string until I think we're a little bit closer to having some of the other pieces of the end time put in place.
So is this an attempt, you mentioned time in relation to Jerusalem and UNESCO, is this an attempt to forestall the return of Christ?
No. They're not looking to forestall the return of Christ. They understand that the end time that they're trying to bring about is also going to be working hand in hand with the return of Jesus. What they're trying to do is they're trying to bring about this rendezvous with destiny that they like to call it before the ordained time. They'll accept the ordained time, but they'll try and do everything and have done so throughout history to bring about this final battle. But until the restrainer is moved, we know that can't happen.
Right. How do you define the restrainer?
Well, there's two schools of thought on it, and I'm kind of moving a little bit more away from it being the Holy Spirit, although I'm a little bit agnostic. I also, because I've been persuaded by some other people that Michael is a good one to look at as also the restrainer, because he fights Persia, he's active in the end time, so it might be that, but I was always sort of brought up and taught, and it sort of made sense that it was the Holy Spirit. So, but I'm a little bit more agnostic on which one of the two it is today.
Wow.
Well, I appreciate you being candid about that. Yeah, I've been raised as a Christian believer since age 16 when I accepted Christ, and that's been my understanding. The restrainer is the Holy Spirit. But without getting into the weeds too far on that, Richie, did you have something to jump in on?
No, I'm good. I was going to jump in and say I was wondering if Gary had saw any of Benjamin Netanyahu's responses to UNESCO's decision. He was furious. He was tweeting away about it.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen it, any of his responses, but I can't imagine he would be all that happy. He's an interesting individual to watch, and I did watch his speech at the UN 6 weeks ago or less, and he absolutely chastised them in terms of their record. And so I can imagine what he might have said, but I haven't seen any of that. So I apologize, but I haven't seen or heard what he had said or tweeted.
Do you see this move by the UNESCO? And I appreciate the fact this is diverting away from your book, but we'll come back to it. But my reason for asking these questions is because of in Scripture how Israel is presented as the timepiece, and especially in the end times, we're to keep our eye on Israel and not be distracted away from the events there. So that's why my focus at this moment in time. Do you see this action by UNESCO as a attempt to prevent the building of the third temple?
Yes, I do, and yet also but for maybe a different reason than maybe what I think you might be asking, because what we also know is under this universal end time religion is there will be permitted at the signing of this covenant, this world deal, that the sacrifice is going to be permitted on a wing of the temple. Now, we can debate whether or not that means on the wing of the mosque that's sitting there, the Dome of the Rock, or as Josephus describes where the temple is located, it's just off to the side on the edge of that crescent hill, based on his. But what we do know is that there's going to be sacrifices offered on a wing of the temple. So some type of temple is going to come. So it's not so much as to control the temple, I think, is what they're trying to do is create a better vacuum so that the universal religion can go in and sort of allow that temple to be built, however that's going to look, because to me it's quite unclear what that means in prophecy. Is it, on the Dome of the Rock? Is it a brand new temple? Is it on a wing of the Dome of the Rock, or is it located just off to the side? And yet they have to build the temple as well, so we're a little bit away. So I think it's to prevent the Jewish people from moving forward today on their temple, wherever they're going to try and locate it, and to buy them a little bit more time. And you certainly see Francis getting a lot more active, not only within Jerusalem and within other religions, including Islam, and trying to bring this sort of umbrella organization together. And so that needs time to ferment. They've got a long ways to go on that yet. So, and for me, as I understand prophecy, is you're going to need that universal religion first, which brings the 10-nation empire, which then brings the Antichrist. And so that religion has to come first.
Well, you're sort of almost alluding to a timeline. Is it fair for me to ask you for a timeline on some of these events?
Oh, no, I would never predict a timeline. That's one of the biggest mistakes that people have done.
Smart man, so Gary. Smart man.
And I would also, I like to go to everything I do. One of the main doctrines is I go to what Jesus said first, and then I assemble everything else around that. And And what we're told by Jesus is nobody knows when other than God.
That's right.
But we do know we can watch for the signs of the times, and so as to not be fooled, but to know exactly when and exactly how, that, nobody knows that. And what we also learn from the history of prophecy being fulfilled, it is fulfilled in ways people didn't expect. And so we have to be cognizant of that as well.
I did find it fascinating regarding the temple that you had mentioned in a previous interview, that what you just said about a wing or a small circle or off to the side from the Temple Mount is the location where perhaps the sacrifices or even another temple will be erected. And so it leads me to think that perhaps the Dome of the Rock itself will be held up as a trophy by this one world religion, to say that they have somehow defeated the Christians and the Jews, specifically the Jews. Is that reaching too far to think of the Dome of the Rock as a false trophy?
Yeah, I've not thought about it in that sort of manner. The universal religion, in my opinion, though, is not wanting to totally destroy the Jewish religion. They actually want the mystical part of that religion, because that's part of their religion. And they want the mystical side of Islam just as they want the mystical side of Christianity, which is Gnosticism. And that's, you know, what they want to be able to pull threads together on.
Okay.
And so the other aspects that they have to be able to do to make this work is they don't have to totally destroy Judaism. They don't have to totally destroy Islam. They're actually, I think, in their belief system, more easily reined in to the universal religion than Christianity. And Christianity, you know, just as with the Roman Empire, is the enigma, and it's the only one that raises Jesus to a deity status, whereas Islam likes to defame him as being a prophet. And
Right.
the Jews like to look at him, if they want to acknowledge him today, as okay, being a prophet as well that was killed, or a false prophet, whichever way, you know, they want to look at that. So
Sure.
it's how they handle the Jesus factor that they're going to have to work on, and that's why they're going to try and destroy Christianity, not only from the Roman Catholic Church, but inside all of Protestantism, is destroy the idea that Jesus is the Son of God, the Word from God that died on the cross and went to heaven. In fact, what they're going to try and do is say that Jesus did not die on the cross. And they have proof that they're prepared to bring about on that in the end time to substantiate that. And again, if you go back to what Paul says, he says, if the resurrection of Jesus didn't happen, then our whole religion is built on a lie. So that is the fundamental thing that they have to take away. And if they can reel through deception and lies, because I don't believe their proof is real. I think it's just part of the main deception. If they can reel Jesus back to prophet status, like Muhammad, like Buddha, like Zoroaster, like Hermes, and so many that they like to sort of have in this cosmology of religions that is at the core of mysticism, then they can rebuild all the religions together as one religion. Right? Because if they
take them all down to the same level.
Yeah, if they destroy the Messiah aspect and that the Messiah hasn't come, and then they can present the Antichrist later as the Messiah coming, and utilize the mystical virus that is in Judaism, in Islam, and in Christianity as sort of that glue to bring them together to rebuild it, then they've got something. Because we need to remember that Christianity has to change significantly because the beast in Revelation, the first beast, has two horns like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon. So it has a superficial look of Christianity, but it has the Luciferian, the fallen angel religion that is being broadcast.
Could you perhaps just go a little bit deeper on the definition of mysticism, if that's what they seek to extract from the Muslim and the Jewish religions, and hopefully the Christians as well?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the Christian religion, you've got Gnosticism, and you might know that as Theosophy, and a newer incantation would be New Age. And then if you have the Islam religion, although you look at the leadership, they're basically preaching a lot of mysticism today. That's the Sufi end of it. And then if you look at the Jewish aspect, that's the Essenes and the Kabbalism and the belief system that goes along with that. And so this is a mystical religion that believes in the sciences and the knowledge gained from angels and the pantheon of God. And it is the same religion that if you get into Buddhism or Confucianism, they just have different names for the different gods. This is that mystical pagan religion that's the same everywhere, and it has sort of branches of that in the monotheistic religions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity.
I guess we're getting a little bit of feedback, guys. I don't know if you guys are hearing that. It just started a couple minutes ago.
Yeah,
we're getting it again. Again, I think if we kind of stop and take a breath once in a while, it kind of lets things calm down. It sounds okay now. You guys okay in the chat?
Yeah, the chat. How we sounding, guys? We good to go? I hear that echo. Yeah.
Are we all right? There's an echo, but we can tolerate that. It's the scratchy pitchiness that comes in.
Yeah, my mic's playing tricks on me here too. It's muting and going on and off on its own, which is really odd.
Okay. Gary, where I'd like to go with the mysticism, you were talking about the knowledge of the fallen angels. Can we explore that a little bit deeper? In my area of research is CERN, quantum computers, and DNA. I'd like to take it into the realm of quantum computing and CERN, if possible, in terms of, let's talk about what fallen angels, how they accessed the angels, and perhaps what it was in the way of forbidden knowledge that they extracted or were given by the fallen angels.
So when we talk about the knowledge, there's two banks of knowledge. There's the knowledge that comes from the watchers, that in the only names we have on those are the ones that are listed in the book of Enoch, so 𝗤𝗏𝗄𝗏 and 𝗢𝗍𝗄𝗏 and on about those ones. But those are very, very limited in terms of information that we're giving on that. We know they're teaching martial arts, and they're teaching astrology, and they're teaching, military warfare and things like that. But there's this idea of this higher level of knowledge that comes through the guidance of the fallen angels, which is the 7 sacred sciences. And what most people don't understand is that comes right out of the history of Freemasonry and their Polychronicon, is that they believe that the knowledge came out of Eden that was taught to Adam, and he teaches that to Cain, who teaches it to his son Enoch, which is perverted from the way that Adam was using it, and then later the Sethites. And that this knowledge comes together to create what they call the absolute or the supreme ideal, and it's also mixes with another science that comes out of the amalgamation of other ones called philosophy, and that's why you have philosophy that's such a huge part of education today. And this science developed to such a high level in the antediluvian epoch that it had the ability to destroy the planet. And this is the level of technology that we're starting to see, not only from nuclear weapons, but other aspects as to, whatever they're trying to do with CERN and so many other technologies like the quantum computers, that they have the ability to maybe even destroy more than just the Earth, because we do know the days of Noah are going to be like the end time. And so this knowledge has to be coming together in a like manner. And in the antediluvian age, we have these beings coming through to the Earth, and is all of this sort of interconnected with portals and gateways and things like that.
Right. So let's step over to the Tower of Babel as a mechanism, as a means for ascending to heaven and peering into heaven, and the knowledge that it took to build that. Do you see, after you explain the Tower of Babel a little bit more from your research, do you see that as represented today at CERN with the Large Hadron Collider?
Well, certainly, I view, and again from Masonic records, that Nimrod was the first Grand Master of Masonry in the post-Diluvian epoch and wrote the Constitution for them that lasted till the time of Heliopolis and when it was reformed at that point in time in the Great White Brotherhood there. But Babel was designed as a first physical manifestation to honor this false pantheon, just as they did in the antediluvian epoch, and they created Babel. And we get a hint of this knowledge in Babel about working together as one people with one language. There's nothing that's going to be prevented from them doing or accomplishing, to paraphrase that. And this is a reflection of this knowledge. And so when we look at the definition of Babel, typically most people look at Babel as the Hebrew definition, as being confusion of languages. But you have to understand, after Babel, Nimrod went to Chaldea, which the Akkadians and the Babylonians came afterwards, descending from that empire. And Babel in an Akkadian definition, as an Akkadian word, is Bab as in gateway and El as in God. So was Nimrod trying to build a gateway to the gods and have either imprisoned fallen angels or other fallen angels who had rebelled come down and help him set up his, let's say, Antichrist-like empire at that point in time, because he very much strut like an Antichrist type figure, and to me is an archetype for the Antichrist as well.
Okay, so do you see that perhaps the common language of today, given that the languages were disrupted by God, he confused the languages? Would you say that today's common language that's being used in a Tower of Babel-like fashion is the language of science, specifically mathematics?
Certainly is one possibility of being a common language. I think that's a little bit more of an allegory, though. And so even though science is predominant and being developed everywhere, I think that was happening in the antediluvian world as well. So I'm still looking for a more of a literal common language as it was at Babel, so that again, it's pretty much identical, because I don't believe there's anything new under the sun, and I think it all kind of looks the same way.
Okay.
So, and I posted this a few times on Facebook, and people say, well, you know, you probably think it's English. I'm going, well, that's the best gamble, but there's no
Sure.
definite proof that that's going to be the case, or I'm even on the right track that there has to be one language.
Sure.
Maybe it's a universal translator like they like to promote in science fiction.
Going to the tower itself, what sort of technology have you seen that they employed for this, in what we would call today opening an interdimensional portal? Was this a physical nuts and bolts technology as exhibited by the construction of the tower itself, or was this a power derived from a spiritual aspect that was employed that
Sure.
we somehow have lost the ability to utilize the spiritual that perhaps they used at that time to open a portal?
Yeah, I think a couple of things is that, you know, the level of technology that they were trying to redevelop after finding the lost sciences and partnering with Hermes, again, this is according to the Masonic history, was a little bit more advanced than what people might think. And so this would be probably some significant technology that they were trying to develop. And plus they also had the ability, as what it is with all of the sort of the adept level higher end of the occult society and secret societies and religions, is they communicate with these celestial brotherhood, or the spirit guides, or the demons or fallen angels. They have several different names that you'll find throughout, you know, occult writings on it, and that they receive information and help and guidance to develop these things.
Okay, so would you say that it was more of a spiritual process than building colliders and DNA sequencers and things like that?
Yeah, I think there's a technology that they were trying to tap into that is absolutely more spiritual than in, you know, sort of what you can physically reach out and touch. And I think they were a lot closer to the fallen angels and the contact than perhaps what these societies are at today, at least seemingly.
So perhaps a more free exchange of communication was taking place than is perhaps capable of being achieved today. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, and you know for sure that there had to be something more going on for them to do this and to build this tower in this city and to protect themselves, and you know where the information came from to do that, and this idea that this tower was going to reach into the sky through physical blocks. There's more going on there than just the physical aspect.
Right. I mean, to think that you're going to build a structure that will reach to heaven doesn't make sense to us today, why you would build a tower. So when I look at this, we see the construction being more of a spiral. And when we look at the application of the acceleration of particles within a circular ring at CERN, it takes on that aspect of something that is more of a spiral construction. And we see the spiral in artwork, we see it in mythology, we see it in the application of symbols today as in the past. So do you get a sense that perhaps it's the spiral in the physical aspect that was maybe an amplifier, that they were amplifying the spiritual communication both to and from the other side?
Yeah, that's a good question as to why, you know, why does, I mean, even a spiral tower doesn't resemble sort of the pictures enough of what we're seeing of CERN, but yet we see other depictions of that in megaliths and structures, you know, around the world that would probably be a little bit more similar to CERN and more into Eastern mysticism, where you might see more of that symbology.
Okay.
So yeah, it's one thing that it's kind of hard to put your finger on there, but it certainly is a piece of the puzzle. But
and I don't mean to put you on the spot. I realize that you're focused on the bloodlines more than just the singular question of the Tower of Babel.
Yeah, but I do recognize that you know, this tower does reach into heaven somehow. I do recognize that they're trying to bring back and reestablish the antediluvian sort of world order of the Nephilim, and that this requires the angels to be part of that. And I do recognize that portals, gateways, stargates are all part of occultism around the world. And somehow they're able to do this.
Okay. Is it fair for me to ask questions more on the technology side now regarding CERN and also quantum computers, or would that be taking you out of your element too far?
It's a fair bit out of my element. I mean, I can talk a little bit about quantum computing, but I'm not an expert in this area.
Yeah. You know, Richie, my buddy here, he has been very kind to be quiet and let me run at the mouth, but he...
No, you have to understand, I know when to keep my mouth shut. You guys have at it. Have at it. No worries, man.
Well, I want to credit you with an analogy you gave to us about 2 weeks ago when you said that the quantum computer that is operating interdimensionally, you said, is much like a telephone between us and the other side. Gary, do you see that perhaps that's the impetus for quantum computing? Given that they, for specifically D-Wave Corporation, who says that they reach into parallel dimensions and grab resources and bring them into our own realm. I mean, these are the statements coming from their founder, from Gordy Rose. Is that a fair analogy to the purpose of creating quantum computers, to use them as a communications device?
I think it has the ability to do that and more. I think you know, it has the ability to change things. I think, you know, when you look at all the different possibilities that you're doing with quantum ideas in terms of being in more than one place at one time and multiplying that over and over and over, I think it has so much knowledge. I think it can hold, I think the latest that I heard on quantum computers was it can hold over 30 times of every particle that's in the universe. And I wonder, with that kind of knowledge, what they're not able to do with that. I mean, everything from AI that is absolutely scary, which is, I think, intimately connected with this whole technology that they're doing, and also reaching into different dimensions, and maybe even time as a dimension. I don't think that's possible, but scientifically, just going with what they're talking about, but anytime that they're trying to get into another dimension, communicate to another dimension, we know that some of this goes on anyways, I think they're trying to get into a specific dimension. I think they're trying to get into the abyss. That's what I think they're trying to do.
Oh, that's fascinating. If they are trying to get into the abyss, is that more than just for the purpose of communicating with those in the abyss, do you think?
Yeah,
I know this is speculation, but
yes, it's all speculation for sure. And I think, yeah, they're trying to find a way to get the most evil and all of the impassioned fallen angels out of the abyss, and the demons that were sentenced there as well. So I think they're trying to do that.
I'd have to agree with you. I'd have to agree with you, and that is frightening, man.
I'll give you sort of the scenario that, in a nutshell, that I've put the quantum computers together with CERN. I think of CERN as sort of the drill bit that's trying to pierce the veil, and the control of that drill is the quantum computer. And I try to put things in very simplistic terms. As a communication tool, I can understand that, and as a control mechanism for the opening of a portal by CERN. I guess the point I'm making here is that, does that sound, the question I'm asking you, does that sound too far-fetched of a scenario, connecting the quantum computers to CERN for the purpose of opening the portal as it's related to the abyss? Does that sound too far off track from your area of research?
No, because my understanding, there's only about 4 to 5 of these high-level quantum computers that are out there right now, and one of them is working with CERN. So why would you put a quantum computer in with CERN if you weren't trying to get into a different dimension, which requires quantum mechanics?
Agreed. Well said. Well said. We spend an awful lot of time, Richie and myself, talking about quantum computers and the research that I'm doing, and I don't want to get into that today, because that can be for another time. What I'm looking for here is crossovers of your research and my research, and it looks like this is sort of a pun, but it looks like we're walking in parallel universes here.
Oh, Anthony, with your pun.
I had to say it. I had to say it. I am stunned. I'm definitely buying your book. I'm definitely going to read it page to page, not just buy it. You have corroborated for me and for Richie, I'm sure, an awful lot of things that we have been examining for many years now, and I commend you for the diligence and the depth of your research. I'm not bringing this conversation to an end until you're ready to bring it to an end, because I know you have a lot more to add, so I'm turning the floor over to you.
Well, I actually prefer to, talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. I can go in a lot of different directions, but I think you guys are better, have a better understanding of what your audience may be a little bit more interested in than what I may just want to talk about. But
well, let's take it to the modern then. If we're talking about bloodlines and Rosicrucians, and we're going all the way up to the 13 families, and the question's been put to me, who's behind CERN? Yeah. Who's behind the high technology, whether you're talking CERN or quantum computers or DNA manipulation and transhumanism? And, I've heard you speak of the hybrids, and perhaps they're going to be indwelt by the spirits. The focus of the question is, who's behind all this? And I think you've answered that by saying, ultimately, it's the 13 families. Is there something you can elaborate on that more in terms of the context of high technology and who's driving it, and why are so many people in science going with the flow, going with this? I mean, we've talked about the promise of immortality and solving all the world's problems as their carrot and the stick, but how do you get a rational PhD level person to go along with the 13 families agenda?
Yeah, so you get a lot of people just sort of following along from the brainwashing of you know, from education right through to university and beyond, right? And all the way through, they're learning about things that are going to lead them away from God and to deny God. But when you get to who's going to lead these scientific organizations, then you need to understand that these are going to be initiated people into the Gnostic and Luciferian initiations. And so they, at that level, are, you know, if you get into the third degree of Masonry, or the 33rd degree, which is the Scottish Rite of Masonry, that's when you learn about who Lucifer is, and you swear your allegiance to them. So if you look at the adepts at that lower level of the secret societies, Freemasonry, or the Illuminati, is that these people are going to be likely well initiated into that, and they're leading everybody else, and they've all been well prepared. And none of the people in science will ever consider and be part of what the research is that will reflect another possibility other than what they've been brainwashed. So if you're going to talk about creationism or anything that about design or the order of the universe as not being a fluke, they won't even consider it. So it never ever goes into their thesis. And this goes all the way through to, again, lead people away from God. And so when we talked about the Royal Society, all of the science organizations pay homage to the Royal Society today, and this is a distinctly mystical society. Science is a mystical society. It's just at the lower level, the people don't really seem to think through the brainwashing that they're being misled. But the higher you go up in there, they actually throw out evolution. They throw out all these ideas because they know they're false. They're the ones who created these false ideas, right? So it's at a certain point of knowledge or illumination or enlightenment, as they like to call it, that they learn the whole secret, and then they swear their allegiance. And then you look at how these things are funded. So it's one of the good reasons to learn about Nazi Germany is that part of that whole infrastructure was this idea that you have under National Socialism, which is, you know, the political belief system of polytheism and leftism, is that you have not an extreme like communism. Ideally, is you have an oligarchy set up where you have private enterprise working for the government and for the government's agenda, as what they set up in Nazi Germany. So you have these large corporations that are working hand in hand with science and come together in these projects like with the quantum computer and with CERN, and they're the ones that are funding it. But these large corporations are basically controlled and owned by these oligarchs, and they are part of this whole agenda. So even if you look at North American, you've got the Rockefellers, who would be part of this organization, and there are many, many families, right? But they own so much and they control so much. And just as you have them controlling the trust groups and the organizations trying to bring about world government, and multiply this over and over and over and over and over with this type of setup around the world. So it's easy for them to get the people of like minds together to fund it. And the ones that they don't already have, they start bringing them into the Bohemian Grove or into the Bilderbergers. And that's why you have all of the new money that comes along, whether it was Bill Gates or whomever you want to pick, start being visible at these organizations. They weren't part of the bloodlines, but they're being introduced and they're being drafted into this agenda. Did I answer that clear enough?
Sure. I think that's beautiful. What's the leverage? What's the leverage you get? Just as a figurehead, let's take Bill Gates. I have nothing against Bill Gates as a person, as a human. But what would be the leverage of the old money to the nouveau riche, to the new money generation, to get them to become involved in a secret society agenda? Is it the threat of destroying their empire, or threats against themselves personally and their families? And what's the stick that they use to coerce people into following this Luciferian agenda?
I think it's not the stick. I think it's the carrot. And I think it's the promise of more power, more money, and that would extend onto their progeny because they believe so much in bloodlines, right?
Right.
And also in knowledge, as in the secrets of the universe, in promise of immortality. I think they promise all of that to them because it's, again, a constitutive part of this mystical religion.
So one of the carrots that I think I hear you saying is knowledge, the tantalizing carrot of saying, would you like to know the secrets of the universe?
Yes.
And to an intelligent person like Bill Gates, that would be very hard to resist, I would imagine.
Very, very powerful, and also be part of the builders of cracking that, right?
Right, right. Something that I have explored that I'll give you just a taste of is with the model quantum computers that D-Wave has publicly announced. I've extrapolated the numbers to a higher degree of numbers beyond what they're advertising to the public. And I could envision the people involved with these computers as just finding it irresistible to keep pushing the technology and to be given the information to even initiate it. Again, as Richie had pointed out, how do you make the leap in such a short period of time of going from transistors to qubits almost in an overnight fashion? And it's evidentiary that that's information, knowledge that was provided from the other side, so to speak.
I agree. And the Rosicrucians say they converse with the spirit realm regularly and higher. And so if you go back to the development of another example that I've used earlier to keep it consistent is look at the development of what the Nazis did. You know, when Hitler takes over, he's got basically no army, no technology, and all of a sudden by about the late 1930s and early 40s, they've got the coolest weaponry ever. They've got the best tanks in the world and several different levels of that, although they couldn't build them in enough numbers. They're developing things like the rocket. They're developing stealth airplanes. They're developing this Bell thing that there's lots of speculation on what that might be, time machine or related to CERN, who knows. And they believed that they were talking to these spirit guides and they were getting the information from them. But again, that makes sense because these were all people that were part of the Rosicrucian and Freemasonry society before they went a little bit more rogue than what they would have liked them to have done.
Well, let's go to the nuts and bolts then. Why today do we have to have such elaborate devices? And again, it's kind of building off what I said earlier about the Tower of Babel versus, technology versus spiritual communication. Why do they have to have nuts and bolts today? Why not just make this completely a mystical, spiritual communication process and just spiritually open a portal and do that through the mystical practices of communication instead of quantum computers?
Yeah. And duplicate what seemingly Nimrod was able to do.
Yeah.
And why can't they do that today? It is a question I have pondered, and the only thing I can attribute it to is there is a restraining factor that is going on that prevents them from doing it. Right?
Yeah, that's the nub of the issue. That's the conclusion I have arrived at as well. It's fascinating if we could somehow, depict or decipher or take apart what that restriction really is by the restrainer. What is the mechanism? What is it that's being denied that forces them into this massive machine at CERN and the advances so quickly in these quantum computers? What is it as a mechanism, I guess is what I'm saying, that actually restrains them from pursuing the mystical and spiritual route.
Yeah, I mean, I can, if we believe that they can communicate, and we believe that they are getting information, why not the next step? That's really what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
What's blocking them? Why let some things trickle through?
Exactly.
It's a good question.
So let's go to maybe a more definitive question. The key to the bottomless pit.
Mm-hmm.
If you would please, if you could, in your own words, define what that key is that is given to open the abyss.
Yeah, whatever the key is I'm not sure what that represents, but generally, a key not only unlocks doors, but it's also a key to knowledge. And again, it's interesting, although it's maybe a bit allegorical, and I'm not a real fan of that without the proper translation, is a star falls from the sky, right, with an angel who opens up the abyss.
Right.
So that's an interesting choice of words. And typically the Bible doesn't use words and descriptions loosely. So does that mean that they're able to reach and bring an angel through that's going to be able to do that? Or is that a good angel that opens up that key? And is key an allegory, and I haven't found it in the Bible yet, and maybe you have, but I've not been able to quite decipher that. Is that another word for technology, or the development of technology, or some sort of enlightenment? Not sure about that.
Well, I'll go to the direction of what I think, and again, this is just me connecting dots, but I believe the key is actually a key for decoding a code. It's a key of encryption. Mm-hmm. And that the advancement in the quantum computers, not only in their model numbers, but in the way that they operate for the purpose of breaking codes. It goes back to what's known as Shor's algorithm 2048. But it is for the breaking of codes, RSA codes, and then the encryption of secret codes operating within the realm of the quantum computers exclusively, thus unbreakable codes. I see the key as a key that has to be broken, that you have to have the key to decipher the code, is what I'm saying. So that's the way I'm looking at it from a technology perspective, that once you have the key to decode an encrypted piece of information or knowledge, then you have the ability to apply that secret knowledge that you just decrypted, to actually open the abyss using the collider.
Yes, and then so would you say, in just to sort of follow your line of thought there, would you say then that the angel then with the key is an allegory?
I would say it's an allegory. I don't think it necessarily has to be an angel or something that falls from heaven. I think it's more like you described, where you're actually reaching through to another dimension, to another realm, piercing the veil and bringing through not only the angel, and I describe that as digitized DNA, but also the information, as Gordy Rose from D-Wave would say, reaching out and grabbing those resources and bringing them into our realm. Those are his words, almost verbatim.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. It's certainly a distinct possibility, because Revelation 9 is full of mysteries, and that is one. Is it physically that it's going to be done by an angel sent by God to let them out, or is that part of letting things develop to a certain degree that the rebellious ones find a way to release these monsters from the abyss at the time that God wants to permit it? And maybe is that the trickling effect that he's allowing this to happen? Because typically everything that happens, as I understand in Revelation, isn't God raining terror down on us, it's terror we're raining down on ourselves.
Exactly. And that's the question that oftentimes is posed by our audience members to Richie and myself, is number one, is CERN going to be successful? And if so, is that part of God's plan? And I would agree with you. Everything's God's plan, number one. It's his exquisite timing. And he is going to allow all of man's imaginations, as you said, related to the Tower of Babel era, all imaginations will be allowed. All evil will be allowed. And I totally agree with you. We bring it on ourselves. And the judgment is by our own design at our own hands.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing, and I've taken that word key back to Greek, and I've looked at it several different ways, and it certainly could be, an unlocking of the knowledge to do that. But other than making that connection, and I like the way you put it in terms of deciphering the code, or deciphering the code of the science to make this happen. I don't know. I don't know of any other way to connect that, but that is certainly a good possibility, and it would certainly relate directly back to CERN, no doubt about that.
And we talked about how do you get people to do the bidding, and I agree with you. Using the carrot is much better than the stick. And we go into the discussion of compartmentalization, both military and also within the realms of science, and the brainwashing all the way from our first days in nursery school. The compartmentalization, I'm relating to the question that people often say, well, how, if you approached a physicist or an engineer at CERN and said, do you believe in Lucifer? They would laugh at you.
Yeah.
And I think that that's evidentiary of the compartmentalization effect. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, it is, and they give as much information as they need to deceive people, and so the best way for them to move people away from God is to deny God, and then by example, to deny that Lucifer is there as well, so that through our own arrogance and hubris and pride, we're going to develop our own skills to help make our lives better and to improve our lives, and ultimately, try and become immortal, but through science. And it's that constant step by step of the brainwashing that goes on. Just as, how do you take somebody in a secret society who comes in at, say, a Freemasonry at the preparatory levels, to go from just being somebody who believes in, as long as they believe in a God, they can be in that society, to becoming indoctrinated into Luciferian indoctrinations. Well, they go through this series of step-by-step initiations that takes time, and it's a little by little that they keep bringing them along, and they keep bringing them along with carrots. And again, looking at what goes on in science as what goes on in secret societies is that, once you learn more and you accept more and you do things in the way that they're wanting to do, they reward you more as you go, right? So if you're a scientist, you get more funding, right?
Yep.
Because you're giving them the pre-concluded ideas that they're looking for. And as soon as you stop doing that, you stop getting your funding.
Yeah, and to things like the Nobel Prize. I mean, you're elevating people in an ego fashion. You're elevating them to higher and higher pinnacles within the realm of the scientific community, and therefore, the prestige factor comes in to play, as well as the dollars.
Oh, absolutely. And they've raised scientists by doing this to almost priest-like, god-like characters. I know that's an overstatement,
Yes.
but
no, it isn't. I've used the same characterization as you. Absolutely, it's definitely the priesthood. Yeah, let's take it to a bigger scale.
Yep, go ahead.
Let's go to a bigger scale. The masses around the planet, 7 billion plus people, and talk about psychology. Can you apply some of the brainwashing we're relating to the scientists themselves to the brainwashing of the masses as you see it from the methodologies employed by the mystical and secret societies?
Okay, so the first thing is they want to control the masses, and everything about what they're trying to do is control, right? And
yep,
so,
absolutely.
All they're trying to do is keep us distracted and keep us in the dark and to get us hooked on things that are easier. That's why socialism works so well for them, and on ideas, have us be too involved with entertainment so they can brainwash us with ideas there. When we go to school, they've got us cornered there, then keep us distracted from what's really going on outside, not only through entertainment, but sports and things like that. They are continually, in a very broad and organized manner, not only giving us ideas all the time that is part of their belief system and doctrine, but keeping us from even criticizing or asking the hard questions, and then also distracted. It's just, it's an organization of such size and scope that if you talk about it, people say you're crazy, but yet you can see it manifested everywhere.
And that's mass brainwashing.
Yeah, and I think they've done a very, very good job on it. And it's why I think so many people like to use the word that once they start to ask critical questions is they wake up. You wake up from this brainwashing. And I know it was with me. I mean, I fell away from God and in my teen years, and I fell into the evolution idea and everything else. And then all of a sudden, once I started to research what 𝗦𝗰𝗿𝗍𝗍, who kind of got me back into the fold with his late great Planet Earth book, and started to rediscover, all of a sudden you wake up and you don't look at things ever the same again. And I think it takes a lot to wake people up.
Well, I think that that is what drives people like you, myself, 𝗦𝗰𝗍𝗍𝗍, who my co-authors in my book, Revising Reality, Douglas Woodward, 𝗦𝗰𝗵𝗿𝗍𝗍, Josh Peck, were collaborators, 4 authors on one book. This is what drives us, is to awaken people. And I go deeper than that. You mentioned critical thinking. When we present these problems and these scenarios, it's always important to provide tools and methodologies to counter the psychological programming or the brainwashing that's going on and the distractions as you described them. So I always like to try to go to methods and tools to counter, and you present yourself as a contrarian. I do as well. It's the critical thinking that I have offered many times, and I'm pleased to hear you mention that. Critical thinking, analytical thinking, being contrarian to the status quo is a tangible way of offering to people, how do you wake yourself up? What's the process? Or how do you help others around you to awaken to the game, as I call it, because we are being gamed, especially on a psychological level.
Yeah, and if you overwhelm people with too much, then they just turn off. Like it just either overwhelms them, or it's just too much for them to, you know, to sort of accept all at once. All you can do is you know, a little bit at a time, and give them some things to look at and think about. But at the end of the day, they have to want to continue. You know, and I think it's very, very similar to, I think if you have any sort of calling from God at all, I mean, and we're told that, you know, you need to be called, I mean, you have to listen, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise you can be called and not hear it because you're not listening. And so I think all that you can do is just continue to have people just take a step back on things and just think about what's going on. You know,
there you go.
And not to get too apolitical, and I'm Canadian, so I don't really have, I guess, well, I do the outcome, but if you look at how the media is so controlled and one-sided these days, if you don't ask why that is, and what are they trying to do, and why are they trying to do that, and then what are they connected to that would make them want to do that, if you don't understand that, and you haven't even asked that first question, then it doesn't start. And I'm a big proponent of is just start asking good questions.
Yeah,
and
it goes to the core of what motivates people. You know, what are they motivated to do in life?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So,
well,
and again, if once you start doing that, if they don't get too fearful, or if they don't feel too much that it's out of peer pressure, Or maybe if they've just got a natural calling, maybe they'll pursue forward. But
Sure.
so many people just want to say, you know what? Even if what you're saying is true, I don't want to know it.
Yeah.
That
and
that's when you know that their brainwashing is successful. And again, they tell us about all of this in entertainment. So it's like waking up in the Matrix, right? And the one fellow wants to go back to sleep.
Yep.
Right?
That
analogy.
is. Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's the ultimate in brainwashing, is where people just accept their reality. And that was, what drove me to, work on my book, Revising Reality, was that you don't have to accept that reality. You can be presented another, but we do it with the understanding that many people would rather just stay in the cube. They would rather stay in the box. It's more comfortable, it's safer, they believe, but they just don't understand that the ultimate outcome of what they believe to be safe and the giving up of their liberties in that short-lived time frame of feeling secure is ultimately their demise.
Exactly. And that's, and these organizations and people leading these organizations, they don't look at us as being of the same level as what they are. They look at us as inferior, not worthy of evolving to gods, mundane humans who don't have the spark of the divine, only good for slavery and slaughter. And given the opportunity, they will slaughter us, and they will in the end time.
Yeah, and I know you're familiar with the infamous Georgia Guidestone statement engraved in that is, the ideal population of the planet, including, the globalists, so to speak, is less than 500 million people. So,
and that's using their estimation on the numbers of what they would want. And I'm not sure how they arrive at how they can track that, but they're creating information banks to be able to track who, as part of the genealogies and plus the scientific text, tests, whether it's for DNA or whatever, or blood.
Sure.
They'll identify who can live and who can't live, and who's going to be slave and who's not going to be slave. So,
well, let's take a quick leap, if we could, over to a short discussion on the mark of the beast. Could you define what you see through your research will be the physical, if it is physical, or the spiritual, or both, the manifestation of the mark of the beast, what it is, and will people have the free will choice to accept or not accept? Could they be tricked into taking the mark of the beast once you define for us what the mark of the beast is?
Well, I think people can be tricked. I think they can be medicated. I think there's all sorts of different ways that people will have to be increasingly more critical and scrutinize more whatever they're taking, whether it's vaccines or whether it's medicines, because again, sorcery is 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗱 from Greek as it's translated. And again, not to say you shouldn't take medications and not to say that vaccines are bad, but they open up avenues that could be accessed to help control people and dumb them down so that they're more easily willing to accept the mark. What the mark is I think is a bit elusive, because it doesn't come until the last 3.5 years. So I'm not being evasive. I'm gonna get there, but I think we can only look at its lower level idea today, and we can only look at what the secret societies, the Gnostics, envision it might have something to look like as well.
Okay.
So, in the 80s, everybody came out with, was really hot on the UPC code, and that still is there today, and it has that mysterious 3 6s that don't show up on the bars that most people are aware of. So is it a continual evolution of that? That is definitely a strong possibility as being inserted into your hand or into your forehead, and increasingly smaller, and increasingly with an ability to control you as well as the technology comes into play. So I think
Sure.
that's a possibility. But I think it's definitely more an evolved thing than what we're seeing today. And so that what exactly that mark is, and I like the word mark. So it's an interesting word that's used. So that is going to have a play on what that is as well. So, but I'm still leaning to technology as something being inserted, and it like a chip, like it has the UPC type of coding, but way more advanced.
Okay.
Because it has to be there for transactions, and it has to be able to record that, you know, in a computer language, right? So it has to be related to the technology. So it's got to be connected to that. Now, if you get into the occultist society, not that they have total control over this, but they actually believe in some circles, the higher up circles, that it's more of the 𝗦𝗷𝗱 mark. That is going to be the mark of the beast. And for them, that is the mark of Cain and the mark of the 𝗦𝗷𝗱𝗁𝗍𝗍. So is that just sort of an allegory and a belief that's been built over time, or are they going to build that type of mark into whatever this mark of the beast is going to be? But they very much are a fan of the 𝗦𝗷𝗱𝗁𝗍, and complete with the ankh in the middle.
Right. We've had some discussions about 322 and skull and crossbones as just one example of perhaps what might be the mark of the beast, being comprised of a third strand of DNA being added to our own DNA. I don't know if you see any indicators of that from your studies.
Only the aspect that when we look at how the world was corrupted, and I look at the antediluvian world as being totally corrupted. So not only plants were corrupted, not only was it violent, but all animal life for the most part was corrupted. What does that mean? Well, if you understand that their technology was as great or greater than what we have today, and probably greater, then that means they could have been doing all sorts of DNA manipulation or hybrid splicing of DNA. And I think that if we look at the end times being like the days of Noah again, then perhaps we're going to have some sort of alien or some sort of DNA corruption that would be similar to what went on in the days of Noah.
Okay, let's pull back just a little bit in terms of technology as a whole. Oftentimes it's said that the technology that we are aware of as the public is the tip of the iceberg of hidden knowledge that may be 30, 40, 50 years in advance. How does that play out in your read of the secret societies and how they operate with their hidden knowledge?
Can you run that by me again? I missed the first part of the question, I think.
Yeah, just the technology that the masses are aware of is the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, of the technology that's hidden from us.
Yeah, I think they're well ahead, and that would be sort of typical as they're trying to bring society along in preparation for acceptance of these types of technologies. And I think that's just sort of part of their whole MO and how they do things. And you have to understand that they truly believe that the supreme ideal that I talked about is what they call a Unitarian conception. And the development of this, and it's all through the sciences that they're developing this, will achieve a perfect ethical spirit in their beliefs. So they're going to homogenize the spirit and the technology as they get this out, but they can't get too far ahead of the people, right? They have to bring them along, I think, in their opinion. And this knowledge has the ability to bring on this new age of Aquarius, or this new golden age. And so the ultimate development and how they bring the people along and how they're going to structure this play is all pre-planned by them. And again, I think they're increasingly frustrated because they just can't move it along as fast as they want. But they do view that they have this today, that they could bring it about if they were permitted.
Well, let's play out a scenario here. Going back to population reduction, if we are facing the specter of nuclear war, and even if it isn't nuclear, but mass extinction by war or biologicals or EMP, whatever the scenario, if they just simplify things by reducing the population, then they can apply the technology and get the remaining subjects, the serf class, to willingly accept the mark of the beast. And from that point, they can be controlled. And if advanced technologies that have been hidden can then be applied because you have a compliant workforce of slaves, then the implication is, or the application of that hidden technology can be done virtually overnight because no one's going to resist it.
Yes, yes, and I would say also that this whole idea of overpopulation comes out of the Club of Rome as one of those things that they want to utilize to bring about world government, but it's still a constitutive part of their doctrine because they want less people, and they only want, for the most part, people of their kind, so to speak. And so they will need a technology to limit the people, whether or not it's through time, a longer period of time, which I don't think they're necessarily that civilized or patient to do. So I don't think it's through sterilization. I think it's through a technology. And the way to mass influence people is through things like vaccinations, mass medication, or a mass implementation. And that technology will do two things. One is especially if it's an implementation of technology with the mark, one is you have to choose to take it or be beheaded, is what we're told. And the other one is that people could also receive, some sort of technical injection out of the implants that will eventually kill them, whether or not it's a quick death or a painful death, we don't know.
Sure.
But I think all of that is tied in, and I think they'll use all of it. And I also think that, I would not be surprised that they dumb down people even more through pharmaceuticals to be more willing to accept this mark, as well as false carrots.
So it isn't necessary that the implications of accepting the mark of the beast be presented to a subject. Is that right?
Not necessarily, because when people are enamored with the false messiah, not everybody will be. I mean, that's going to be the case, and we know not everybody takes the mark. But also, I think they're going to be promising things, right? I think it's that carrot thing, and I think they're going to be promising that even the mundane, as they would like to call us, are going to be able to evolve or have a part of this new world. But again, not everybody is going to accept the carrot. Not everybody can be bribed, as much as that bribe might be. So I think it's in tandem. And that's how complex I believe their planning is. It's just not any one thing to accomplish their goals. They're using multiple things all of the time.
Okay.
Or did I just muddy the waters up too much on that?
No, that's fine. I'm just going to shift gears on you again a little bit here. When we talk about the mark of the beast and third strand of DNA, the distribution of that DNA I have presented as being accomplished through aerosolized spraying, the chemtrails. Could you just in general, not necessarily specific to the mark of the beast, but could you give us your read on why these societies are spraying the planet?
Well, I think the first thing that they have to do is they have to get the world to come together. And along with that, what else are they doing with it? But to me, that's their top priority is to force the world to come together under two things. One, a new world order, which is the world government, and two, the universal religion. So they have to do things to prepare people and to scare people. And they use a lot of scare tactics like the environment, like overpopulation. And these are all
Club of Rome doctrines that they started in the late 60s and early 70s, because it transcends borders. And plus, chemtrails may be changing the weather as well, which, you know, sort of feeds into global warming, which again, most people hate it when I say this, but this was also one of the ideas that came out of the Club of Rome in the 70s as well. So environmentalism, fear from destroying the planet, apocalyptic things, all are designed to cattle herd people to accept the idea of world government.
Yeah, I like your phrase. I've heard that in your other interviews of cattle herding. It's so appropriate.
Well, those are their words.
Yeah, as well as useless eaters. Thank
Yes.
you, Henry Kissinger.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I know that we've been going for 2 hours now, and I don't want to, you know, fatigue you to a degree, but I'd like to throw the door open to you to go wherever you want to go for as long as you want.
No, I think I'm good. I mean, there's probably not a lot of time to really open up another, you know, long big door here. But I think one of the things that people need to understand as we, in taking it back to how does it affect everybody today, and whether or not they're going to awaken or not, is you have to understand the language of what these groups and organizations and societies and religions utilize and say, and it's everywhere. And one of the things that, you know, I try and do in my book is have people understand that language, whether or not it's in entertainment or it's in government or it's on what they talk about, what the world government is going to look like. They have a specific language, and they use it all the time, and they hide their belief systems, their genealogies, and what they're planning to do in front of us all the time. You just have to understand their language.
Okay, let me stop you. Let me stop you for just a second, because we're getting a lot of feedback, and I really want you to be able to clearly define the language that they're using. Richie, can you help us out at all?
Not really. There's no feedback on this end.
Okay, maybe we just need to take a break here for a second. Is it any clearer now to the chat room? How's it
sound, guys? Give me a sound check. Any better?
This is sounding better at my end now.
All right, now I can hear it echoing now.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we're at 2 hours. This happens a lot when we go this long.
Let's try it one more time. Go ahead with your description or definition of the language that they use.
So everything is about, and everything in secret societies and everything in Gnostic religions are about symbolisms and allegories, and having it placed so that only those who have been enlightened can understand. So give you an example of how they'll speak. So if they're talking about this knowledge that was in the antediluvian epoch, or this knowledge that they're going to utilize that's going to help them evolve the gods, you'll know it as like the pearls of wisdom, or the emerald tablet, or the golden fleece, or the treasure at the end of the rainbow. This is symbolize things, and it's also called, you know, the Hall of Records, or the Archives of the Masons, or on and on and on, the golden apples. And so they use this type of allegory front and center all of the time. And so when you see something that is continually pushed, whether or not it's the Akhenaten and King Tut reign and museums, it's there for a reason, and you need to understand and learn about history as to how they fit in. If you're seeing all of these fairy tales out there, this is putting in all of their allegories, doctrines, and genealogies. If you look at the classics, whether it's Shakespeare or it's Ovides, and right back into prehistory, they have done this all the way through. Everything that they do, whether it's political or not, has this encoded language, and you have to start doing your own research. And the book will identify a lot of that, just as, you know, identifying what the 1,000 points of light is, and why they picked 10 groups of nations or spheres of influence or trading blocks is, you know, kind of the languages that they like to use today, to have the world split into 10 groups, which again, the Club of Rome has already done from the late 60s, early 70s, and that's their main goal. If you dig into prehistory, and if you dig into all of the things that they're putting front and center to us all of the time, all the different symbols, and everything is big on brands and symbolism, it's all there. You just have to dig into what it really means, and that starts with asking the questions. But my book will give you some, you know, a lot of those metaphors and allegories to dig deeper into, whether or not it's the fairy concept, or it's the vampire concept, or it's the dragon concept, or it's the serpent concept, or so many other allegories that continue to inundate people with. And just look for the types of narratives that they continue to always put front and center, because it's the same ones over and over and over and over and over.
Well, certainly popular culture is the brainwashing tool of the elite, so to speak.
Yes.
All right. Richie, go ahead if you've got something you want to throw in there. I think I've exhausted my questions and my guest here tonight. 2 hours is a long time. I appreciate it very much.
No problem. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So it's nice to do a show where we're just discussing things that, you know, nothing is pre-planned, and I have no idea where it's going to go or what the type of question is, because I think I learned some things as we go through it, and I certainly did today with your input, and I certainly think the audience gets a chance to compare ideas and maybe think about things that they hadn't thought about before.
Well, thank you. Very well said. Hey, Richie, come on, wake up there, my friend.
I'm right here. I can't get a word in edgewise. All right, Gary, I appreciate having you back on again, man. Anytime you can make time, we'll have you back on, because a 900-page book is a lot of information to go through.
Yeah, it is. It is. I took 25% out to get it published.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm not kidding.
Volume 2.
That's it.
Hey, I will post your book and this conversation on my homepage, on my YouTube channel. Richie, of course, has his YouTube channel. We'll give it as much exposure as we possibly can.
Good. I really enjoyed it tonight. I hope you guys did as well.
Anytime,
Absolutely.
Gary. Whenever you can make time, we'll have you back on.
Okay. I'll shoot some more dates for you, Richie.
Awesome.
And
thank you very much. I appreciate your time, man.
Just for the fun of it, also, I want to mention that 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗍𝗍 will be on with us in the coming days, very soon. We're pinning down a date, but I'm definitely going to have him prepared by taking a look at your work. I'm sure he's aware of it, but I just want to let him have a chance to listen to our conversation, so that perhaps when he comes on the show, he can add to some of the dialogue that we've had tonight.
Well, that would be fascinating.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Great guy.
Certainly is. Not that I know him, because I don't, but I know a little bit about his work. So,
well, Richie and I had the privilege of meeting and speaking with him at length in Knoxville at a conference just a few weeks ago. And LA and I are going to be collaborating on some projects together. Not that I'm anything special. I'm just, you know, totally floored by his invitation to even work with him. So definitely, I can see pulling you into this circle and having more discussions, Gary.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to what he's going to bring out on that little fairy thing that he's digging into, because fairy is so much about, you know, part of the allegories and the bloodlines of my research. So,
well, as you said, the matriarchal and the patriarchal being the male, the dragon line, and the fairy being, you know, the mother, the female line. I had no clue of that, but I know that you know, LA has found that the fairy was something that was constructed, he has proven that it is a hoax. I offered to him the scenario that perhaps someone built it as a model, as a representation of something that they observed and experienced, and was using it as a way to convey that experience and observation to other people who otherwise would not believe them.
Yeah, interesting. I had not heard that he had proved it as being a hoax. I had my fingers crossed that it wasn't this time.
When they took it out of the formaldehyde, it basically fell apart.
And they found basically an epoxy compound that had been holding together, I think specifically one of the large globules of epoxy they found was holding what would ostensibly be the femur into the socket of the hip joint, and that there were some pelvic structure inconsistencies that didn't read right. So yeah, once they took it out of the formaldehyde, it began to fall apart, and they found the epoxy that had been used.
Okay, well.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
like
okay.
I say,
yeah. Everybody's out there trying to, add to the conversation and learn more about things, and that's what the process is all about.
In his line of work, he runs into hoaxes. It happens. You know what I mean? He's brought so many great things to the forefront that people never saw before. So he's a loud one, because he's really getting beat up on that, and it's too bad.
Well, I don't know why he would be. I mean, he found something and researched it, and
right. All right, Gary, I'm going to cut this down because we're losing it anyways. I appreciate you coming back on again. Send me some dates and we'll set this up again. No problem.
Okay. Thank you, Richie.
No worries, man.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
All right. Good night, sir.
All right. I am going to jump over here to what's left in the chat room. Everybody went to watch the debates. That really makes me sad. It really, really, really does.
Oh, that's disappointing.
It is. All right, guys. We have just about had it. They're starting to mess with us pretty bad now. It seems, because most live streams, I've watched live streams that went on for hours, and they go off without a hitch. Every single solitary one. We are 20 for 20, where every one of them something went wacky. So I don't know what the deal is, but fortunately we still got this one out. Anthony, I got to thank you again for coming on, brother. That was phenomenal.
Yeah, I had a great time. It's great to compare notes with someone on this graduate level, and for us to have an exchange of ideas that the audience gets a chance to, listen in on.
Indeed. All right, I am taking my dog for a walk, Anthony. I will talk to you very soon, and we'll do this again. If the creek don't rise and the good Lord's willing, and we're not dead. Richie from Boston, Anthony Patch, we are out.